Welcome to Forbes Newsroom. Joining me now is Zach Everson, a staff writer here at Forbes. Zach, thank you so much for joining me today.
Great to be back, Brittany.
You've reported before on politicians' PACs or campaigns spending money to buy their books. Who's the latest?
The latest is former Vice President Mike Pence. His PAC spent $91,000 on November 9th at a bookstore, which they then confirmed to me that, yes, it was on the vice president's book, which came out 6 days later. And, as I was thinking about the timing of this, and it didn't get in the article, but November 6th, that is right after the election. This is a election that the Republicans narrowly lost the Senate. They narrowly won the House. They were about to go in a runoff in Georgia. Mike Pence has a PAC, and he decides to spend $91,000 on his own book.
In terms of other politicians spending money on their own book, where does $91,000 land? Is that a lot or more par for the course?
It's up there. I mean, typically you see it in the tens of thousands. Occasionally you'll see it reach into six figures. What's interesting with this one is also it did become a bestseller. It debuted at number 2 on the bestseller list. And the New York Times, though, flags books when they're bulk purchase reported. And there was no such bulk purchase reported here for Pence's book. So I'm not sure if it just wasn't factored in or what the deal is, but it certainly appears that this big purchase, not only did he profit, but he got some nice publicity ending up on the New York Times bestseller list if these books, in fact, were counted towards that.
And you mentioned the timing. What does that timing right around the election indicate?
It indicates it's where his priorities for his PAC were for buying his book and not necessarily spreading the wealth. It's also an interesting decision for somebody who's potentially running for president. One of the best ways they can shore up some support from other politicians is to start spreading the money around. Case in point, Kevin McCarthy. And, Mike Pence chose not to do that and instead spend the money on his book.
And you write that even if politicians don't profit directly when their political committees buy their book, it can benefit them. Can you elaborate on that?
Exactly. Sure. There are two major ways that I see they can benefit. First of all is the aforementioned New York Times bestseller list. If their purchases, even if they don't profit from that purchase directly, if the purchase gets them on the New York Times bestseller list, that's some great publicity, not just appearing it on the list itself, but New York Times best-selling author gets slapped all over the book and all sorts of other promotional materials. The other way is it might make them more enticing to publishers in the first place. And sure, okay, this guy's going to write a book and maybe people will buy it. Maybe there'll be some interest, but he can buy $100,000 worth of his own book. That's got to appeal to publishers. And the law's written so that if you're actually a candidate, you're not supposed to be able to personally profit from those deals. You're supposed to buy it directly from the publishers. Doesn't always happen. And in this case, Pence, not being an active candidate, bought at retail. So even if the author's not getting their cut, the publisher certainly is, and they're certainly moving all of those books, which I would imagine would make working with a politician a lot more enticing.
Of course. And you mentioned that it was legal for Mike Pence to do this, but where's the ethical lines here?
I talked to a campaign finance expert who said, yes, this is legal because he's no longer a candidate for public office. The ethical lines are really blurry. I mean, Mike Pence, it didn't appear he's donated any money to his own to the PAC. So that is 100% using donor money to buy his book. And ostensibly, they said they structured the deal in a way that he wouldn't profit directly from it. But again, it does benefit him when those purchases are made. So, it's really murky waters there. And you keep seeing people pushing that, especially Senator Ted Cruz, who's been using campaign funds to buy ads, encouraging people to buy his book retail, which is a way to definitely shore up his sales and profit directly.
Let's talk about Senator Ted Cruz. So you reported in November there was reason to believe that Ted Cruz might have used campaign funds to boost sales for his latest book, Justice Corrupted. Is this a similar case here, or are there any differences?
Well, this is more direct. I mean, Pence's PAC just flat out bought the book. Although, again, he did say his spokesperson did say the vice president didn't profit directly from this. But what Cruz did was really interesting because he is still an elected official. So those FEC rules apply to him. And what he did was he used campaign money to buy ads on third-party services. Now, the FEC has ruled if you want to put a little ad at the bottom of your website that says, buy my new book, that's fine. because the cost of doing so and the time in doing so is negligible. If you've got a website, it doesn't take much just to put another graphic up there. But what Cruz did was different in that he went to a third-party service to buy those ads. I believe it was WinRed, and that the FEC has not ruled on. So we don't know exactly, how that falls, where it falls with the law. It does seem unethical though, and it certainly seems against the spirit of the law. But shortly after he did it, Lauren Boebert did the same thing.
And the PAC described these as collateral materials. What does that mean?
They're often given out to donors. You'll see him right now. Donald Trump, for example, bought a lot of his, one of his campaign finance groups bought a lot of his coffee table book, and they're currently offering it to donors who donate, I think it's like $75 or more. So a lot of times you'll see them online, like, donate this much. We only have 5 copies of the book left, and, we can reserve one with your name on it. Other times they might just be given out at a fundraiser. The people have already donated tens of thousands of dollars to the PAC or bundled other people's donations. They may feel there's no need to nickel and dime them for another $50 for the book, but that is most likely how they were used.
The name collateral materials is kind of vague. So why are they allowed to not itemize these purchases and instead keep it vague like that?
That is an excellent question. And that is why I missed this the first time when it came out. He reported this back in December. I have a running search for the word books. So whenever some candidate or political campaign buys books, I will see it within a couple of days of it being posted. And I missed this because it was described as collateral material. And so, yeah, it is vague. And sometimes the FEC will come back and say, hey, this is described in a vague way. We need to get a little bit more specific. Other times it doesn't. And in this case, it looks like it's okay with collateral materials. And you'll see the FEC will come back and say sometimes like, oh, that's too vague, rephrase it. And they will rephrase it just a little bit and provide no new details. And the FEC just ignores it.
Got it. And Mike Pence has been floated as a possible 2024 presidential contender. His PAC, though, spent $91,000 on his books rather than helping other GOP races in the midterms. And the midterms were tight. It wasn't that red wave that they thought was going to happen. Do you think this will come back to bite him?
It depends if anybody other than us make that association. I don't know if it's going to get out there. There's certainly a lot of other candidates buying books, so that story is well known. The Pence piece has gotten some traction, but it'll be interesting to see what if that does resurface. I mean, I think it's certainly something that should be considered, though, especially if you're a donor to his Great America Committee, realizing that your money was used to buy his book and not help Republicans take the House or Senate, or actually improve their margin on the House and take the Senate.
Well, we will definitely keep our eye on this. Zach Everson, thank you so much.
Always a pleasure.